Whether you're left, right, or somewhere in between, Montana is talking here. This is Montana Talks with Aaron Flint.
All right, Niemont for the victory here. They came in at the last minute. We had some technical challenges. I was trying to get my gear ready to go for this statewide show, and I was like, oh man, my system is not connecting. And luckily, there's a guy from Niemont right down the hall from us here with a booth already set up, ready to go at the KATQ Northeast Montana Farm Expo. Semper Gumby, that's what we always say. We're always flexible around here with Montana Talks. Hey, Aaron Flint, great to be with you. What a beautiful day for a drive yesterday, making the drive up through Glendive, Sidney, Culbertson, Montana. I mean, no snow and ice on the roads, sunshine the entire time. I feel like I haven't seen the sun in like a year. But it's just incredible, too. I mean, the way that the ice and the snow that was still out there on the prairie, you could see every nook and cranny out there on the horizon of the prairie. Just incredible. It reminded me of that great quote, anybody can love the mountains, but it takes a soul to love the prairie. So great to be here in Plentywood, Montana. I think they're going on something like 40 years here for their Farm Expo here in northeastern Montana. Jim Nielsen is the sports director for KATQ Radio. Also, I believe you're a retired Department of Homeland Security guy as well. Jim, good to see you.
Yeah, nice to be on the show, Aaron. And, in fact, I used to be a teacher and a coach, too, here in Plentywood. I was a basketball coach, assistant boys, and head girls basketball coach, and I was a math teacher for like 25 years, and also worked at the port of entry here north of Plentywood as for Department of Homeland Security, and then sports broadcasting. So I do a lot of different things.
You've done it all, yeah. So which job what do you like about this neck of the woods so much? Describe Plentywood for people on the other side of the state that maybe have never been here.
Well, like you said, it's a kind of flatlands around here. I mean, it's rolling hills, but a farming community and ranching community around here, and I think that's what people like about the scenery around here. It's not the mountains and the lots of lakes and big bodies of water, but there's a lot of hunting and fishing not far away, and I think the people around here is a big attraction. People that have grown up here, love to come back because they like the type of people and the friendliness and, just the community spirit in this area.
It's known as farm and ranch country, but back in the day, Plentywood was actually kind of the land of the outlaws. There were a lot of outlaws in the Wild West that would hide out in some of these little rolling hills up here. Yeah,
there were some spots, not too far away where there would be kind of badlands type area and remote, kind of remote was the attraction for these outlaws that would look for spots where they could get away from kind of society. And there's a lot of things up in this area that a lot of history around here.
One of the things that's really taken off here is where, it's National Ag Week. Yesterday was National Ag Day. We're at the KATQ Northeast Montana Farm Expo. The pulse crops. I remember being up here a few years ago, and our friend Terry Farver down the road in Scobie took me out on his farm and was showing me these pulse crops and was saying, hey, this is why pulse crops are taking off here in northeast Montana, and wheat farmers are integrating them into the cycle. So we're gonna talk about pulse crops. We've got the Northern Pulse Growers Association here in the house. We're also going to talk Northern Border Security. Arlen Call with the Border Patrol here. He'll join us in a few minutes. And she's the force behind the NFL kicker, Kayla Carpenter, wife of Dan Carpenter. Remember seeing him play for the Grizz and play for the NFL? Well, she's a mover and shaker here in the farm community of Plentywood. She's going to join us on the show as well. Lots to talk about. We'll take a quick break, back with more live from Plentywood right after this.
Broadcasting live across the great state of Montana, this is Montana Talks with Aaron Flint.
Well, just as we kicked off our statewide show of Montana Talks, they just kicked off the Northeast Montana Farm Expo here on National Ag Week. We're live from Plentywood, Montana this morning. Great to be with you. We've got KATQ's sports director, but he's kind of done it all. Jim Nielsen, he's worked on the border with DHS. He's been a coach. He's been a teacher. And now he's covering it all for KATQ. Jim, the other thing I love about Plentywood is you really feel like you're on top of the world when you get up here. You feel like you're looking down and you can just see everything when you pull into Plentywood. Even though we know there's still a lot more country north of us in Canada, but you feel like you're at the top of the world. What do you like most about this area? What's your favorite job that you've had amongst all those different roles?
Well, I've enjoyed everything I've done. I love being a part of the community and associating with people like you do when you're teaching and coaching. And through the radio broadcasting and sports broadcasting, I've been able to kind of stay in contact with, young people, and I enjoy that an awful lot. And, another attraction of this area is the support of the young people and of sports. There's some good sporting teams. I cover this town of Plentywood and their teams. Also, Medicine Lake and Freud have a combined sports team. And Westby, Montana, and Grenora, North Dakota have a co-op for sports, and I cover their teams throughout the year. So a lot of good teams, and I've really enjoyed following them. In fact, we just finished the state Class C boys basketball tournament in Billings.
That was a great time. I caught in on a couple of the games down there. I got tagged along with some of our Scobie friends for a couple of those games, and they were just a blast to take part in. Well, thanks for joining us here on Montana Talks. Thanks for the hospitality. Great to be up here in KATQ country.
Yeah, great to be on your show, and it's been a lot of fun to visit with you.
Yeah, great to chat with you. Well, speaking of sports, we've got our sports mics on here and everything like that. Kayla Carpenter is kind of known as a mover and shaker here in farm and ranch country in Plentywood. You might know her even in our friends in western Montana, of course, know her as well because her husband, Dan Carpenter, played for the Grizz and then played in the NFL, first with the Dolphins and eventually with the Buffalo Bills. Kayla, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us here on the show as well. Good to see you down here.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, doing good. So I know I've heard about you and your husband Dan through our friend Doug Betters. He always did his Winter Classic. He was a killer bee for the Miami Dolphins back in the 80s, so he always enjoyed having you guys make the trip from Plentywood all the way across Highway 2 over to Whitefish for that event every year.
Yes, that was really fun. We enjoyed every second of it. It was before kids, so we really enjoyed every second of it. It was great. It was a really fun time. A fantastic organization that he runs there to help raise money just for medical expenses for children and adults who travel for medical needs and things that insurance doesn't cover, say hotel rooms, food, all the bits and pieces and odds and ends that insurance won't cover, his foundation covers. So it was fun to go raise money for that and see our friends from college. And
so going from the NFL to ranching, you're getting ready to start calving here soon. At least you haven't calved yet, but you're getting ready to do that. Going from the NFL to calving back in your home country of Plentywood, what's that like?
Well, it's a little more comfortable for me because that's what I'm used to. Dan is learning, but he's extremely eager to learn, and he's enjoying it. He did say the first calving season's on me, and he will just follow and help. But he's getting into it. Yesterday he drove down, goodness, I don't know where, South Dakota or something, to get a maternity pen, and he had to figure out how it worked. He set it up. He knew right away everything. He's kind of a perfectionist, which I guess helped him well in the NFL, but he's a perfectionist, so he set it up, and he knows the ins and outs of it, so he can
because he's a Helena kid originally, right? He's from Helena, so he grew up in town then?
Right, right, which I suppose for Montana is city, but compared to Miami or Buffalo, Helena isn't too city. It's still fairly country. And he thinks that he was born to be a country kid anyway, so he's pretty excited to be here, and he really enjoys where we live. So.
It really is. I mean, a lot of people have a dream that when you're a kid, you wish you could play in the NFL someday, but there's also a lot of us kids who grew up in town who, like, you hear the song "Should Have Been a Cowboy." He's kind of getting to live both dreams. He got to play in the NFL. Now he gets to be a cowboy too. He gets to do it all. Well, and it sounds like he's a real enough man, a smart enough man to listen to his wife tell him how to be a rancher too.
Absolutely. We'll stay married for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're from here originally. Your mom, Laurel Clausen, actually just got named 2018 Ag Woman of the Year for the Farm Expo.
Right.
So
that's right. Yeah.
That's pretty exciting for her as well. So Bonnie Simon with KATQ Radio tells me, she says Kayla Carpenter, she's the idea person around here. She's got all sorts of good ideas. What are some of these good ideas you got?
Oh goodness, I don't know.
No.
Well, I'm trying to think what Bonnie would be thinking. Possibly we did our first pumpkin patch here. I don't think Plentywood's had a pumpkin patch before, but I helped the chamber put one on this year, so we did that. I don't know. I mean, I am a 4-H leader. We started a new club up in Outlook, the Redstone Outlook 4 stars. A Clover Bud Leader, which is Intro to 4-H for kids ages 5 through 8. I'm in the Homemakers. I might be one of the youngest members in that, but it's a really fun crew.
My aunt is in the Prairie County Homemakers.
Hey.
And they do some really cool stuff down in Terry, Montana as well. So it sounds like you're kind of trying to do a little farm-to-table type stuff. I know there's a great fundraiser, I think, going on tonight. I'll share some of the news on that front. In Glendive, I think it's happening tonight. Paul Sturlogson will tell us about it after this, but Bruce Smith, Big Bruce Smith, who's joined us when we've done live coverage from the Gate Show in Glendive, of course, has been battling cancer. The community's coming together to do a spaghetti dinner for him. So, any of those MSU extension agents across the state, you probably already heard about it, but if not, we'll have the details for you after this. Well, we got to take a quick break here on Montana Talks, but we want to talk more with Kayla Carpenter because we were talking about those outlaws back in the Wild West here. Well, she's got a great story on their own ranch she'll share right after this.
Now, here's a look at your latest news. A teenager accused of killing a man in northwest Montana during what investigators say was an argument over drugs has denied 2 felony charges. Martin Chandler appeared in Flathead District Court on Thursday and pleaded not guilty to deliberate homicide and felony use of a firearm stemming from the February 14th death of 54-year-old William Melton. The 19-year-old was arrested near Columbia Falls soon after Melton was killed at his home in Coram. Last month's harsh winter weather has delayed a pilot project that aims to stop the rise of toxic water in Butte's Berkeley pit. Montana Resources' Mark Thompson tells the Montana Standard that the mining pit is still frozen over. Construction has slowed, and the project to treat and discharge the water isn't expected to begin now until sometime around June. Montana Talks, and I'm Jeff Howell.
Talking about the issues that matter to Montana. Statewide, this is Montana Talks with Aaron Flint.
All right, in just a couple of minutes, I want to play this clip. We'll have our producer, Travis Lee, will cue it up for us. So I'm driving from Glendive and through Sydney, and, of course, listening to the great radio stations by the Marks Group radio stations across eastern Montana. And so I hear our great friend Paul Sturlogson share the news about this big fundraiser for Bruce Smith. So I'll play that for you here in just a couple of minutes. But first, here we are. We're in Plentywood for the Farm Expo. It's National Ag Week. So we're going to talk with the Northern Pulse Growers Association because the pulse crops have just exploded here in eastern Montana, but really across the state. In fact, now we're the leader in pulse crops across, we're talking peas, lentils. Montana is number one. So we're going to talk about that coming up in the second half of the show. But first, great to get a chat here with Kayla Carpenter. Her husband Dan played both for the Grizz and then in the NFL for the Dolphins and the Bills. Now they're back here ranching in Plentywood, Montana. But Kayla, I was talking with Jim Nielsen about how Plentywood is kind of outlaw country. Back in the Wild West, the outlaws were here. I guess your ranch actually had some of that outlaw activity on it back in the day.
Yes, it did. The Dutch Henry hideout is on our property on the northern border there. There's not much left of it now, but one of the original homesteaders was an artist, and she drew a picture of the hideout when it still stood. And she was very, very detailed in her picture, and every hill is exactly the hill that it is today. And then there's a little spring coming up from the ground that ran right by it, I assume where he drank from and his horse drank from. And so if you follow her picture and go out there, you can find the indentation in the hill and see the foundation. I wouldn't mind taking a metal detector out there when the kids get a little older, because I think it'd be really cool to kind of poke around a little bit, And then also on the northern border, the Kelly Cave, right on the Canadian side of the border, you can see from our property, and that's kind of neat. Take the binocs out and look in there, and you can research it on the internet. It's pretty cool. Although if we want to see it, we have Border Patrol all over the place. You have to go all the way around and go through Raymond.
We're actually she's joking because sitting right next to her is Arlen Call, who's the, what is it, Arlen? Agent in charge? Is that what it is?
Patrol agent in charge.
Patrol agent in charge. All right, so we're gonna talk with him. Well, actually, let's bring in right now. We'll mix it in. We'll talk more border-specific stuff here in a second, but you guys are, this outlaw history, you guys kind of patrol all over these lands that these outlaws roam.
Right, so we call it, the end of the outlaw trail where the outlaws went across the border to where these caves are. We call them the outlaw caves in Canada. They call them the Sam Kelly caves. And you can stand up on the hill and you can see the caves that they made into the hill where they would actually hide out when the law was chasing them.
And that's, I think that also helps paint the picture for Plentywood, because a lot of people think, eastern Montana, like we got folks right now and all over western Montana, and they think, eastern Montana's just flat. There's nothing to see there. But actually, you get off the roads, and it's kind of like when you go to the desert. I know you've patrolled the southern border, but when you get down on the desert, you get out off the path, you can see, it's not just brown everywhere you look. There's remarkable terrain features and plant life and everything like that. Same thing up here in these rolling hill country.
Right, especially up there on the Carpenter Ranch. They have it's very rugged terrain, and a lot of it, and right across the border, it continues into that area where the caves are. It's very rugged. It's far from the plains that you normally think about eastern Montana.
Yeah. And Kayla, we were talking during the break, so you were talking about you're training your NFL husband to be a rancher now, so you're turning him into a cowboy. You got kids. You got your kids even helping to raise chickens now and everything.
Oh, yeah. They love their chickens. Their bank accounts are growing because of their chickens. They have 27 chickens and a rooster that needs to go because he's pretty nasty. So the end of him will be soon probably. But they get, probably 20 to 25 eggs a day. And so then we wash them up and they take them into town. And once a week they have an egg route that they hit. And then they take their money to the bank after that. They get to keep about $1 or $2 for ice cream or a little something at the store that they want to buy, and the rest goes into the bank. But, it teaches them, values and the value of money and saving and spending and manners and how to speak to adults and how to sell things. And they're young. They're 3 and 5, but they're learning. So just a few words, thank you and a please and a $3 a dozen, and that's about all they know.
Well, I hope
they
realize how good they got it up here too. In fact, I'm kind of thinking, maybe you guys could start like a carpenter summer training camp where, they can get some football lessons in the afternoon. They can go learn how to, ranch and learn how to work in the morning. So we'll just all send our kids your direction this summer if that works for you guys.
Well, that'd be great. I was a teacher at one point, so I would actually love that, but it's a long ways out there. We live in the middle of nowhere, so
it's a haul. That's what's so great about. Well, Kayla, it's so great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on the show, and tell Dan hello as well. And in fact, I know next week we're going to talk with some other football players because they got the Montana Football Hall of Fame banquet taking place next week. So some of them might join us on the show next week. Around the same
the
time.
end of March, right?
Yeah, we're already there. Can you believe that? Oh, you'll be there.
Well, it was our original agent, Ken Staninger.
That's right. He's getting recognized.
He's being inducted in, and he passed from cancer a few years back. But his wife or his widow asked us to come, so we are going to all get together and have a good time and honor him. So
wow, that's incredible. And he's the guy who isn't he the guy who basically was the agent? They got a lot of other guys into the NFL, like
absolutely.
Guy Bingham, maybe Doug Better, some of those guys too. I know
they
all know each other at least.
He loved his Montana boys. Yeah, I would say the majority of his clients were Montana boys. He knew well, and when you take a Montana kid and you put him in the NFL anywhere in the United States, more than likely they were raised right and they know how to behave, and it made his job a lot easier because he knew they were usually good kids.
Football players that don't know how to behave.
Oh, imagine
that couldn't be a story. I don't know about that. Well, again, great to see you, and hopefully we'll see you guys there when you're in town for the Football Hall of Fame banquet. Also, all right, great to see you, Arlen Call, Border Patrol agent in charge. Scobie kid. This is the great thing about Arlen Call. He grew up in this neck of the woods. He knows this area, he knows the people. And Arlen, I think you're going to retire with your boots on up here too. And some rancher said, hey, this doesn't look right out here.
That's right. And that guy actually locked him up in his shop and called us. he knew something wasn't right.
Yeah.
And that's been years ago now, in 2004 or 5, somewhere back then. But, yeah, he had called in a bomb threat to in the United States, and then subsequently crossed the border and then was apprehended.
Yeah. Well,
that was here in Montana. That's not the one that happened out in Washington. That was before that.
Sure. Yeah. What's your biggest challenge aside from just the terrain, the massive amount of terrain you got to cover?
Well, that's the biggest challenge. Is it's a little bit of a needle in a haystack. The amount of area that we have to cover. with the limited resources that we have. Like Kayla was saying, it's a ways up to their place, and then you get to their house, and that's not even on the border. It's still a challenge to get to the border from their house. So it's not like that everywhere, but a lot of the areas, especially out in our western area to the west of Plentywood, it's a challenge to get up to the border. We have different, of course, we have air assets, but we on the ground then have snowmobiles, tracks on our UTVs that allow us to get into places. But
how has the southern border changed since maybe you were there several years ago? Because you've probably turned down promotions so that you can stay here in this neck of the woods, which is a good thing because it's hard to get people to come up here to remote northeastern Montana. But how do you think the southern border has changed since you were there a few years ago?
Mostly it's the unaccompanied minors and the family units that are arriving, where when it was mostly the illegal aliens from Mexico, we actually had to track them down and look to catch them. Now they're turning themselves in and using the loopholes in our immigration system. An interesting fact I saw here is we catch more family units in 3 days than are removed from the country in an entire year.
Wow.
So those illegal alien families are settling inside the United States with a very low percentage of them actually being removed from the country.
Basically we have incentives in place right now as a country to encourage people to sneak into this country illegally and then just turn themselves in and say, hey, here I am. I just snuck in illegally. Come pick me up and give me a free ride. That's basically the law right now.
And that's what's happening right now on the southern border, and that's where the crisis comes in. Is it is a totally different. Never mind the actual numbers, it's the type of the individuals and where they're from that are arriving that we right now do not have the way to remove.
Wow. Yeah, and that's why we do. That's why the crisis of today, at least in my opinion, is so much more of a different type of crisis than what we've seen in the past.
And that magnet is causing people to die in the desert. That's the sad part, and that's why we say it's a border security crisis and a humanitarian crisis, because people are dying because of the magnet that we're allowing to happen.
Yeah, wow, fascinating stuff. All right, we got to take a quick break here on Montana Talks. More with Arlen Call, the Border Patrol agent in charge up here in northeastern Montana. Then we'll check in with the Northern Pulse Growers Association, talk agriculture here at the KATQ Farm Expo in Plentywood.
Broadcasting live across the great state of Montana. This is Montana Talks with Aaron Flint.
All right, the hour is just flying by here with Montana Talks live from the KATQ Farm Expo in Plentywood. Before we jump right back into it, I do want to share with friends across the state. I know many of you know Big Bruce Smith. Whenever we're at the Farm Expo in Plentywood today, but, every year I like to get out to, as much as possible, like to get out to the Gate Show in Glendive. That's their Agri-Trade Expo. And, heck, every year I've been there for the Gate Show. The guy to talk to has always been Big Bruce Smith, who's been the longtime extension agent there. But when you go to the Gate Show in Glendive, they have this great, kind of like a grocery store right there with all these great Montana-made products. Bruce has been one of the leaders in farm-to-table concepts in eastern Montana, and just a great guy, a great resource for the whole community and for farm and ranch country especially. But Travis Lee, I think he can cue up the clip for us. Paul Sturlogson has the details on a big fundraiser coming up to help Big Bruce.
Spaghetti dinner and benefit auction for Bruce Smith, longtime Dawson County Extension agent, a true community champion, and Eastern Montana's ambassador. A gentle giant of a man who has helped solve our plant and animal questions, worked on the Gate Committee, the EPIC Board, helped with recycling efforts, and given numerous trainings from leadership, farm to table, gardening, building birdhouses at 4-H camp, the community garden, and county agent radio report. Bruce has been stricken with inoperable cancer. To help with the expenses, please join us at the EPIC for Spaghetti Dinner, Friday, March 15th, 5 to 9 p.m. Prepared in the commercial kitchen Bruce envisioned, then helped become a reality. for people to pursue their food production dreams. If you would like to donate items to the auction, contact Les Metzger, 939-1705, or Glendive Broadcasting. You can certainly drop items off here or at the Epic. Big Bruce Benefit Auction, Friday, March 15, 5 to 9 p.m. at the Epic. Bruce Smith, a forever friend who deserves a tip of the hat from a grateful community.
All right, Paul Sturlogson, thanks so much for sharing that audio with us. Yeah, heard that when I was rolling through Sydney yesterday, and I thought, hey, well, who else better to tell us about that event coming up tonight than Paul Sturlogson? So thanks for sharing that. Arlen Call here, Border Patrol agent in charge, joining us on Montana Talks. Arlen, thanks again for sticking around through that commercial break. Here we're at the Farm Expo, but it's also a great opportunity to talk border security. But really, there's a farm component to border security as well.
Absolutely, Aaron. The northern border, 5,500 miles. It's the largest international border between two countries. And without the farmers and the ranchers and the eyes and the ears that they provide on the border, that's vital for the Border Patrol and border security.
And we were talking a little bit about the southern border and things like that, too. What's your message about how important the northern border is all across Montana? I mean, what do you hear from your guys in western Montana, your guys and gals off, in other parts of the state?
The only difference border-wise is you get out west and you have the mountains to contend with. Sometimes the technology is different in the mountains than it is in the plains. Obviously, the line of sight things change. As far as the farmers and the ranchers, that's the same wherever you go. And it's not necessarily, we say farmers and ranchers, it's not, it's all partnerships. It's other law enforcement agencies. It's maybe the Forest Service, the Fish and Game. Everybody that we can partner with helps us with border security and helps the nation with border security.
Well, and I think right now we're probably closer to Regina, Saskatchewan than we are to most of the big cities in Montana. So there's a lot of cross-border communication, with the Canadians as well. How's that been going? Because we hear a lot of, international trade negotiations and things like that. How are the Canadians to work with when it comes to border security issues?
We have great relationships with the RCMP and Canada and CBSA. Our cooperation with them is vital also. To have a partner on the other side of the border is very important, and I would say vital for us to maintain our situational awareness of what's happening on the border.
All right. Arlen Call, great to see you as always. Thanks for your service to the country, and to say that to your fellow agents out there as well.
Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Yeah, good to see you. All right, well, we're going to switch tracks just a little bit here on the show as well. I've been talking about pulse crops. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I had to kind of laugh on this show because I'll check in on Twitter to see what nonsense is out there being tweeted about. And I remember seeing there was this tweet, and it was from somebody, I think, in Missoula, and they said, they were mocking the fact that Congressman Greg Gianforte was meeting with this National Pulse Growers Council or something like that. Oh, he's got time to meet with them, but not with this other group. And I was like, dude, do you realize how big pulse crops are here in Montana? In fact, Montana is the leader when it comes to pulse crops. And he's like, oh, man, I didn't know that. Oh, shoot. Well, thanks for the heads up. I was like, oh, okay, cool. All right. Well, but at least the guy was like, oh, hey, thanks for the information. Because some people, you can't tell them anything. They'll just get mad at you for setting them on a straight path. But, yeah, just how big are pulse crops here in Montana now? Chris Westergaard with the Northern Pulse Growers Association here in the house. Chris, great to see you.
You as well, Aaron. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so, well, maybe let's start it there. How big are the pulse crops now?
They are big. As you said, Montana is the leading producer in the country. Last year we had about 1.2 million acres out of roughly 2.2 in the whole nation, so it was a big percentage right here in Montana.
In fact, your buddy Brian here is from North Dakota, and Brian, I kind of, I just got to emphasize Montana is the leader because North Dakota's been kicking our butts in a few different categories, so we got to at least brag on this one here,
Yeah, you do.
I mean, heck, he just had I think NDSU was just at the White House for football a couple weeks ago now. And,
yep, they're doing very well. They did very well.
Yeah, and oil and gas as well. And it's Brian Guillon, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Also with the Northern Pulse Growers Association. All right. Paint the picture, Brian, a little bit, the differences between Montana and North Dakota, who's doing better in which category, or what works better in each state?
Well, the thing is, I don't think that one works better than the other. They're very well suited for raising pulses. Because basically, if you take what's raised nationally, the two states together will raise almost over 82% of all pulses raised in the United States. Pulses don't like a lot of rain, and they don't like heavy soils. So we're very well suited. So it all depends on the year. If it gets wet on us, then you may have some issues. If it gets really super dry, you may have it. But over one or the other, it's very well suited for raising pulses.
And Chris Westergaard described pulse crops. I mean, we're talking peas, lentils. What is it that makes them? Well, why do they call them pulse crops in the first place?
So they're peas, lentils, and chickpeas are the three big ones. There's also fava beans, and they're a legume, which means they fix their own nitrogen. So they're a high protein, high fiber, lots of good micronutrients for human consumption as well as animals, and they also do some very good things for the soil too if they fit in your cropping rotation.
Yeah, so what it used to be is when you're making this great drive across eastern Montana, let's say you're going from Fort Peck Lake down to Miles City or something, or let's say you're cutting through Circle, right, south of KVCK Radio Country in Wolf Point, and it used to be you'd have one big line of golden wheat and then one big beautiful black of just soil, right? Because they had to keep that land empty for part of the season, right? Well, then they put wheat on, vice versa. Now they've realized, we can actually put crops in that rotation. We don't have to just leave it sitting there empty, not making us any money. And it's the pulse crops, because that nitrogen you talk about, they're like little tiny beads attached to the root of the crops, right? And then that nitrogen stays in the ground even after you harvest the crops. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, that's right. Those nodules are what you're referring to, and that is the nitrogen fixing part of the root system, and that does stay there. One of the advantages of pulse crops is they're a shorter season crop, and they don't root as deep, so they don't use up as much water as a wheat crop does. And you are absolutely correct. They have replaced fallow in a big chunk of eastern Montana especially, and now into the Golden Triangle as well.
So from an economic standpoint, because I was talking earlier about this, when you're driving around, I think we kind of need to, those of us who are in the bigger towns in Montana kind of need to change the way we think about it. We always put agriculture off as this separate category of business. And yeah, we know it's the number one driver of our economy, but we put it off as this separate category. When in reality, like when I was driving between Glendive and Sydney yesterday, this isn't just some wide open empty terrain out here. There's farmhouses and ranch houses dotting everywhere you can see. So if we think about it, that's a small business, that's a large business. Those are businesses that are dotted throughout this entire vast open terrain of Montana, bringing in a lot of cash. What's the economic impact from these pulse crops now being added into these rotations?
Well, by replacing that fallow, you gain another revenue stream, and then you kind of have to look at it in a systems approach. So since they fix some in and then they leave some in the soil, it requires less applied fertilizer the following year, so you have a cost savings on the back end as well. So in that respect, you get kind of a more bang for your buck, because you get that cash flow that year from your pulses, and it's not quite as obvious, but you do get a return back the following year as well.
Yeah. So, Brian Guillon, from your perspective as well, one of the things I want to ask you about is, obviously you got the Northern Pulse Growers Association, and oftentimes there are industry-specific issues, concerns, whether it's regulatory challenges with the federal government or with state government. What are the issues, concerns, challenges, needs for the pulse growers out there right now? We'll talk about that right after this quick break here on Montana Talks. Just a few minutes left as we broadcast live from Plentywood for the KATQ Farm Expo. By the way, for those of you tuning in eastern Montana right now at 1:30 this afternoon, I'll be at KCGM Radio in Scobie. So if you or some of your friends will be in Scobie this afternoon, stop by and say hi. Back after this.
Montana is talking here. This is Montana Talks with Aaron Flint.
All right, so we're going to talk international markets, and we'll talk domestic markets here as well. So remember a while back we had a group of Real Montanans, the Real Montana crew. They sent a delegation back to India and it was like Lori Shaw with Colstrip United. We heard from one of the ranchers out of in just north of Big Timber, Montana, joined us on the show talking about it from the ag perspective. But yeah, India, actually, when it comes to pulse crops, has been a big part of the news because India, not because of any tariffs we placed on them, they unilaterally placed tariffs on American pulse crops. But India is a big market. You think Indian food, it's peas, lentils, garbanzo beans, or chickpeas, whatever you want to call them. But Chris Westergaard with the Northern Pulse Growers Association, what are the challenges right now with India in the international markets?
So India was our largest export customer by far, and they're, as the world's largest democracy, they're also the largest producer and consumer of pulse crops. Well, 52%, or roughly 52% of the voting bloc in India is smallholder farmers. So part of their domestic policy under their new administration has been to increase domestic support prices to encourage production of various crops, of which not only pulses, but pulses are a big component. So as a result, the Indian farmers have increased their production, and they don't need as many exports. So because of that, the Indian government has instituted tariffs, not just on American pulses, but pulses from Australia, Canada, everywhere. So imports into India, they haven't gone to zero, but they're a fraction of what they were 3-4 years ago.
And, of course, that always brings it back to, okay, how can we focus more on a domestic American market potentially? Because we can't always control what happens in India or elsewhere, but maybe we can have a little more control over the American markets here. Brian Guion, also at the Northern Pulse Growers Association, we were talking a little bit during the break about some efforts you guys are doing to try to help spur more of a domestic market for these pulse crops.
Yeah, like I said, there's a huge potential domestically to develop these markets. Like I said, it's good to have a healthy export market, but there's a lot of room at home here. What we've been doing, some of the stuff even I do locally and regional is do in-store promotions. We go into the grocery store and we go in there and we go down the aisle and pull all the products off the aisle that has pulses in it. Kind of an educational thing, so people understand that what's available and the health benefits in that. But also we've been working with manufacturers and processors too, and working to get more of our pulse flours into like pasta. You know, if you see something on a package that says Protein Plus, more than likely you turn it over, it's going to have a pulse flour in there. So efforts like that is just to get more and more products that have that pulses incorporated. In the last couple of years, 2017, I believe, was 1,500 brand new products that had pulses in them. And then this past year, in 2018, we had like 1,700.
Wow. Well, and these types of products too are getting more popular because, I've served overseas in the Middle East and parts of Africa, and so I love Indian food. So to me, it's like, oh man, if we can have Montana, American-made products to enjoy that type of food, even better. But even like take the chickpeas, garbanzo beans, whatever you want to call them, hummus is really popular now. People using that as a kind of a healthy snack. Well, what if we could market Montana-made products like that, or American-made products? It sounds like a win-win.
Oh yes, and actually, if there is Favor Farms, which I do have at my booth, some of their packaging.
Farmer
Farms, yep. And so they're doing that with their lentils. So, and actually you can pick it up in some of the local grocery stores. So, you start like that. So there's a lot of potential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they got like soup packets, chili packets from Farmer Farms, because they joined us on the show last week. Actually, this time they were down in our studios during the big Class C basketball tournament, and then when I went to the basketball game with them, they had some snacks because they crosstalk with these other producers across the state too. So they had these little snack packs, these little wheat snacks, and then they had some churro cinnamon flavored wheat snacks that are being developed, I think, by Big Sandy Organics too. So that's kind of cool. Even just the little snack packs that people can buy at a gas station or carry with them on a hike or something. Get some Montana-made products. Farm to backpack, I guess, would be the code word for it there. Well, we only got about a minute and a half left. Chris Westergaard with the Northern Pulse Growers Association. Anything else you want to tell folks across Montana?
I think if you haven't tried pulses, they're worth a look. They're good for you. They're not really a natural part of our American diet, but they can be incorporated, and you don't even notice. A little handful in place of some hamburger, and it's good for you. And I love beef, but little pulses goes a long ways too.
How do you guys integrate them into your meal plans or dinners?
Well, like Chris said, and we got the cookbooks too. We're giving them away. Take lentil meatballs. Take a little bit of the hamburger out. You put the lentils in there. Don't really know they're in there. They take on the flavor of those meatballs. So you have barbecue lentil meatballs. You have your meat-based protein, your plant-based protein, little They're good for you. Or you put them in salads, tacos, pretty much anything. You can soups. Put them in there. So there's a lot of different.
It's like a Bubba Gump shrimp company.
Yeah.
It's, shrimp salad, shrimp kebabs, lentil salad, lentil burgers. Yeah.
Well, we got lentil brownies, chickpea.
Yep. Are you sure that's lentils in those brownies? We got some folks in Missoula listening right now. So,
maybe that's something they can incorporate. I guess.
All right. Well, great to see both you guys. Thanks so much for joining us here on Montana Talks live from the Farm Expo in Plentywood. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron.
All right. Yeah. Hey, in other news, of course, I'm passing through oil and gas country as well. I was hearing the ads on the radio. There's oil and gas companies that are hiring, looking for workers again. So I called Alan Olson with the Petroleum Association, and he said, oh, yeah, they've always been hiring. He said, but oil prices are going back up again, too. So he sounded optimistic. So we'll have to check in with Alan maybe next week or something. All right, we're out of time. Thanks again to KATQ Radio for the hospitality. Have a great weekend.
It's not always really quick.